Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to another episode of the Saturdays and Stores podcast, which you can find right here on the Core Store Media Network. I'm your host, Kanaye, and as I talked about on the last episode, which I uploaded, reacting to the announcement that Solo Ball will be missing the entirety of next season, I mentioned I was also going to upload a video very soon about the announcements that UConn got between Braylon Mullins announcing his return for his sophomore season, along with Nikolas Khamenia committing to UConn out of the transfer portal. Now, as I normally like to do on my off-season episodes, I like starting with retention, what UConn is getting back from their previous seasons. So let's start with Braylon Mullins announcing his return. I think Braylon Mullins made the absolute best decision possible by choosing to not declare for the NBA draft and run it back in STORRS for one more year. There's two sides to this. One is financially. Financially, he made the absolute best decision possible. Dan Hurley made it very, very clear early following the conclusion of the college basketball season that Braylon Mullins, should he return to UConn, would make more than, for say, the 15th overall pick in this year's NBA draft. And when you consider what the 15th overall pick is going to make, somewhere in the ballpark of $5 million, Braylon's likely making 4.5 to 5 for this next season of Husky basketball. I think a large portion of the pitch that Hurley made to Braylon to convince him to come back to school for one more year was kind of what transpired with Liam McNeely's draft process. McNeely was mocked as a lottery pick for really the entirety of the 24-25 season, and he ultimately fell way further than I felt he should have. If I'm not mistaken, went 28th overall in last year's NBA draft. I think a lot of that just dealt with Liam in a way maybe not living up to what he was advertised as coming into college, where he was supposed to be the best freshman shooter in the country. And I think the percentages took a dip because Liam had to become the go-to guy last year because he was the only creator on last year's roster, which maybe wasn't the situation that he thought he was going to be walking into. Now, I think had he not been the go-to guy, we probably would have seen his percentages a lot higher and close to what we expected them to be coming into his freshman season, only season, I should add, that he played in STORRS. So I think a big reason why he fell was because of the dip in shooting percentages and him just maybe playing a role that he wasn't comfortable playing and a role that he never had really done up to that point in his basketball career. And I think that's why we ultimately saw Liam fall in last year's draft. And I think when you consider the circumstances that Braylon found himself in at the conclusion of this past season, where he, I don't think this is the right way to phrase it, but he in a way kind of underperformed his expectations, where he also was supposed to be the best freshman shooter in the country across this year's freshman class. And he ultimately was a 30% shooter. Now, I think a lot of that is attributed to the ankle injury he suffered in the preseason, what I think was a high ankle sprain, which kept him out of most of the non-conference slate, where he made his first college appearance against Illinois on Black Friday at MSG and ultimately followed it up with his arrival, where he dropped 17 at Fall Allen Fieldhouse and closed it out with two massive free throws, which were his first collegiate free throws, I should add. But overall, while he did have big moments, of course, none bigger than what is the best shot in program history to beat Duke at the buzzer in the Elite Eight and get to the Final Four, I do think that overall he was a little streaky this year. And I think that, again, is because of that ankle injury, where we didn't see some of the off the dribble creation that he was advertised as coming into STORRS with, where he was the lead guy for his high school in Indiana. He was the lead guy on the Adidas circuit when he was playing AAU for his team. And we kind of didn't get to see some of that explosiveness he possesses. Yes, he got up for a couple dunks this year, but I think we could have seen him do that more frequently had he not suffered that high ankle sprain in the preseason. I think once we get into a setting where he's hopefully 100% healthy, we're going to see him look to do a little bit more off the bounce, where he can create when the shot clock's running down and search for his own shot. He can get downhill and finish on either side of the hoop. He can look to create for others and make some reads. I mean, Hurley talked about him all summer long as a very, very talented passer. I think we still kind of yet to see that out of Braylon, but I fully expect this next year for him to showcase a lot of his passing prowess, because I think he's a very, very smart player. That is normally what you're getting out of players from Indiana. And I think we're going to get a version of Braylon that's very, very close to what you expect out of an Indiana player who can shoot the basketball at a very, very high level and very efficiently. And I fully expect Braylon's percentages from the field overall and from three more specifically to skyrocket going into this next season. I think we're going to see him play with a lot more confidence. We're going to see his shot volume go up. And I think that there's going to be a level of motivation following lose in the national championship 20 minutes away from his hometown. He's going to come back very motivated and very, very hungry to get back to that stage and ultimately win it and bring back number 7 to STORRS. So really pumped about getting Braylon back. I think from a financial standpoint, kind of going back to that, he's going to be the beneficiary of opportunities that he wouldn't see should he have entered his name into the draft and ultimately gone on to the NBA, where because he hit that shot against Duke, I would argue he's the most marketable player that you'll find across college basketball heading into this next season, where we've already seen the sales that have been made on merchandise where Braylon is holding his hands up following hitting that shot against Duke. He's already probably made so much money from that. He was on the cover of Slam magazine just a couple days after hitting that shot against Duke. He's probably made a good chunk of change from that as well. So when you consider the opportunities they'll have outside of the NIL package UConn has set up for him, he's totally in a great spot where he can definitely make a load of money on top of the $4.5 to $5 million he'll be getting from UConn next year from the outside opportunities. I'm sure we'll see some larger brands reach out to him, like for say a Gatorade or something like that we saw some players across the sport have over the last couple seasons. Those opportunities I don't think follow you into the NBA because NBA fans don't always watch college basketball and vice versa. College basketball fans aren't always the biggest NBA fans. I think him choosing to stay in college was the absolute best financial decision. And when you consider that next year's draft class is a lot weaker than what this summer's is going to be, with this incoming freshman class just not living up to what the standard was with this year's freshman class, I think we could really see a legit scenario where Braylon Mullins kind of follows that Jordan Hawkins trajectory line, where just because you come back for one more year of college does not mean your draft stock completely tanks. I think Braylon could definitely find himself in a position to go in the top 10 of the draft or perhaps be a lock to be a top 5 pick. Now, that's pending him living up to his expectations of being a potential Big East player of the year, a potential All-American, whether that's first, second, or third team. But I definitely think Braylon is well suited to be able to go out and do that and really explode in his sophomore season. And I definitely think that the staff, they're going to put him through a very aggressive weight training program this offseason, this summer, and we're going to see Braylon come back a different type of player. And I think in terms of what I would look for Braylon to improve on moving forward is, of course, number one, efficiency. I expect the efficiency to increase next year when he is fully healthy. He's not dealing with losing that little bit of a lift that I think he didn't really have this year because of that ankle injury he suffered early in the year. And I think he just needs to do more as a creator, kind of be similar to what Cam Spencer was off the dribble in his only year that he played in STORRS. So setting guys up, setting the table for others, going and hunting your own shot. I think we're going to see Braylon do a lot of that next year. I think he's going to do it really well to pair with Silas Demery Jr., what I would argue is the best backcourt going into college basketball season across the entire sport. Now to get on to the other guy that this episode is about, that being Nikolas Khamenia. As I mentioned at the start, he announced his commitment to UConn this past Saturday on the day that I uploaded my reaction to getting the commitment from Najee Hines. Khamenia obviously played with Duke this past season. He'll be a rising sophomore. He's 6'8", 215 pounds. This past year, he averaged 5.7 points per game, 3.3 rebounds with just 1 assist on 44% shooting overall and 34% from beyond the arc. Now, he came off the bench for Duke as a reserve role player, and I believe a big reason as to why he decided to enter his name into the portal was because he was not guaranteed a starting spot with Duke next year by Jon Scheyer. So he ultimately wanted to go somewhere he was going to be able to compete at a high level and have a starting role. And that's probably why he ultimately chose UConn. If you can't beat him, join him. And I'm going to keep saying that because, always love getting down on Duke fans there. But to get back to Nick Khamenia, I think immediately following his announcement that he will be committing to the Huskies, a lot of people started saying he's the next Alex Karaban. He's an Alex Karaban clone. And I kind of want to push back on that a little bit because I think they're different players. Their play styles are completely different. Nick Khamenia is not the shooter that Alex Karaban ever was across the 4 seasons he played in STORRS. Now, as I mentioned, he only shot 34% from beyond the arc this year. And do I think those percentages should increase? Sure. In UConn's offense, he's going to be the beneficiary of getting really good open looks at the basket. It's just going to be a matter of him hitting them. And I think he's going to be playing with a roster with a high level of talent between your backcourt of Silas Demery Jr., Braylon Mullins, who should both be capable passers and being able to get Nick Khamenia the ball, hit him in stride so he can feel good when rising up to take shots. So I think there's a fair chance we see those percentages rise across the board from the field overall and from beyond the arc. However, I do worry about how he's going to handle the responsibilities that the 4-man role has been tasked with in the 4 years that Alex Karaban played at UConn, where UConn placed a very large emphasis on having a 4-man that can space the floor, which is what Alex Karaban did and was. You're able to pull some of the larger front court players on other teams out of the painted areas to one, open up driving lanes for yourself if you get someone off the ground with a head fake, or open up driving lanes for other players if you dish them out the ball, or even if you take it to the painted area yourself, you're able to kick it out to an open shooter. And I slightly worry about how Nick Khamenia is going to handle being tasked with running off the curls, the staggers, and the pin downs that they so often ran for Alex Karaban. I don't think he's as quick-footed as Alex Karaban was, if I'm being completely honest, which is something that you might not necessarily expect. However, I do think that as the season goes on, we're going to see Nick Khamenia hopefully come along, because I think that's where the questions with next year's roster have really been trending towards over the last couple weeks now. I do still think that UConn has more questions answered than most programs across the country on this very day right now heading into next season. But I do think that while you have your backcourt secured between Silas Demery Jr. and Braylon Mullins, there's a lot of uncertainty with what the ceilings of both Nick Khamenia and Najee Hines will be in year one in STORRS for both those guys. So I think as the season goes on, we'll see both these guys come along very nicely and fit well into what UConn wants to do offensively, schematically wise, as well as what they want to defensively too. So I do think on the defensive end of the floor is kind of where I am slightly concerned with Nick Khamenia. I do think he's a good off the ball defender. I think he's a good help side defender. He's really smart when recognizing when to trap or when to double team in the post. But but individually, from an isolation standpoint, I don't think he's the best side to side mover. I don't think he's the most laterally quick, and I think he can get beat off the bounce at times. But I do think that while those are concerns, he does have a level of toughness to him. He has a little bit of that UConn kind of grit that Dan Hurley so often tries to look for when he is recruiting players out of high school and the transfer portal. So I think that is going to help a lot. The size at 6'8", 215 pounds is also going to help a lot, where it's going to be tougher to get around him if he is switched out onto a shorter player out on the perimeter. And I think that when you watch Duke this year, there was a lot of pretty funny moments where you see Nick Khamenia make a big play, whether it's hitting a huge three, which is something I kind of forgot to add early on. I'll get back to that in a second. But he'll make a big three. He'll get an offensive rebound. He'll convert on an and one. He kind of starts talking to himself to fire himself up, get himself going. And I think that meshes so well with Hurley. I think he's going to bode super, super well with the culture and the fit in UConn system because of that toughness. And, you can teach good offensive players how to play defense. So I think if Nick Khamenia can contribute at a high level on the offensive end of the floor, the defense should come with it. Kind of getting back to what I was talking about with him making big threes. While he was not the best shooter overall this year, he did make big shots in big moments. I think back to the ACC tournament where he had a huge dagger three against FSU for Duke. Think back to the Siena game in the first round where Duke was on major upset alert to the Siena Bulldogs. And Nick Khamenia made a huge, huge three that really got Duke going, which ultimately led to the Blue Devils pulling away in that game. So I think he kind of raises his game adequately to the moment that he's in. So that's great to see. I think he's really good at being able to get on the offensive glass. Between him and Najee Hines, UConn's definitely going to be in a position where they're seeing a lot of extra possessions because of how often those guys like to crash down low and get offensive rebounds, which is obviously going to help UConn's hopeful offensive improvements from what it was this year as a borderline top 25 offense to what I hope will be a top 10 offense on KenPom next year. So overall, I'm really high on the Nick Khamenia get. I think he's going to definitely come along. There's going to be an adjustment period. There's going to be some growing pains, but I think as the year moves on, we're going to see him fit very nicely into what UConn wants to do overall. And I think we're going to see him definitely, I think, compete at a very, very high level and play with the level of toughness to him that Hurley loves so much out of his guys. I think that's pretty much going to take care of everything that I had on this episode today, breaking down my reactions to Braylon Mullins coming back for his sophomore season and Nick Khamenia announcing his commitment to UConn from Duke. If you stuck around to the end, engage with the videos as always, and also be sure to check out our brand partner, Phorm Energy, for the best fitness apparel and supplements in the game. But until the next episode, where we'll probably see some more commitments go down the next week or so, I'll see you all next time.